Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. A little different presentation, I think, from me we've heard before. Next slide, please. I'm going to just talk about what a big forest company is, and I find it interesting to be here talking about nano and micro when we do things at a very, very large scale. Alberta Pacific, if you don't know us, we're just about 2.5 hours northeast of town here. We have 58,000 square kilometers under forest management, which is about 1/10 of the province. If you really look hard, you can see that we sit right on top of the Western Sedimentary Basin, which is all the oil guys, so we have a lot of fun with them. Forest Stewardship Council, FSC certified, I'll just mention that quickly. It is, depending who you are, the premier forest eco certification. That may not matter, but it allows us to take about any product we create from the forest and have it eco-labeled. This is a scheme supported by groups like Greenpeace, World Wildlife Fund, those things, so it's a big deal to us as we move down. Next slide. What we do basically currently is we produce two products, largely from fiber that comes from Northeast Alberta. Kraft pulp, which goes into making paper. A lot of the paper you're holding probably comes from our forest originally, as well as power. And we're currently in the process of expanding our green power opportunities by creating a transmission line, developing a transmission line, and we'll be about quadrupling our ability to sell green power into the grid, all based on just using wood. Next slide, please. One thing that we've just started commissioning, and we believe this is the first in the world, it's a simple little thing, it's just a distillation tower, but it'll be put into our condensable gas stream, and we'll be creating biomethanol hopefully by the end of this year. We have to purchase a certain amount of methanol in our process, so it'll remove the ability or the need from us to do that, and it'll give us the ability to sell about 2/3, 3/4 what we make into the green market. So either into the biodiesel community or various other chemical industries that are expressing an interest in the first biomethanol plant to be built in Alberta. And I say it should be up and running by the end of this year. We're in construction now. Next. So, forest industry. One of the previous speakers mentioned sort of how we tend to be circling the drain this time as an industry as a whole. Partially correct. Who here has an iPad? Kindle? Come on, don't be embarrassed. Each one of those you can see is pretty much of a tombstone for the paper industry, right? But not necessarily the forest industry. Newsprint's on its way down. All of the communication methodologies, electronic, is hitting hard, particularly the newsprint industry. Hitting our industry to a certain extent, but it's a much slower decline. But take note, it's a decline. It's going one way. For a company like us to survive, we have to diversify. There is no doubt. The reason there's been so many layoffs, how many number of mills have shut down, is simply because we didn't look to the future. So the lessons there, you can either take it up or you can ignore it. Things that are affecting us, Al-Pac is big. We used to be the biggest single-line pulp mill in the world when we were built 20 years ago. We're not. And we were the last greenfield pulp mill built in North America, and we will be the last. You will not see another mill like ours built in North America. It makes no sense now. It's going down to Latin America, Indonesia, where the trees grow in 7 years. They're on tidewater. They have tremendous advantages, the labor, environmental, over what we have here. So we can compete to a certain extent for now. 10, 15 years, probably not. So we have to find other revenues, other methods of creating value from the forest, or we'll have to go find some other thing to do. Next slide. So we created, and I named it the unfortunate New Al-Pac project, which if you do the acronym is NAP. But we wanted to realize a sustainable company, in essence, that we recognize the trajectory we're on as an industry as a whole. Al-Pac is insulated because we are low cost, probably the lowest cost pulp producer in North America. That only gets us so far, and as the speaker earlier said, you can only compete to the bottom line for so long. We want to leverage our two biggest assets, our pulp mill, which is a biorefinery in its own, and our fiber basket, which is, as mentioned before, 10% of the province, and if you expand that into the agriculture zone, gives us access to a fair bit of other fiber as well. So we want to take advantage of those opportunities, and I mentioned the energy sector and the agriculture sector, not competitive. Those are advantages that we have based on geography that we're trying to exploit. Next, please. So we want to continue being a low-cost pulp producer. Everything we do will be based around the Kraft pulp mill as a platform. That's what allows us to create steam, power. We're very good at handling large volumes of biomass, moving at large distances and processing it on site. Those are all advantages we have. We want to stick with those. The methanol, as I said, this year, we have a little thing called Integrated Land Services where we sell consulting services to the oil sector because We're the surface dwellers and they're the subsurface dwellers. We know how to work on top of the surface. They don't. So they'll pay us rather well to help them there. We sell carbon offsets now based on our current power production, green power. So we are selling carbon credits to other industries. Nice little business. And maintain those other things. So what we want to add to that is one or two other things that we've been investigating for about the last year and a half. Next, please. Next. So everything that we have to look at starts at the fiber supply. This is a little picture of northeast Alberta, just concentric circles away from our pulp mill. We've done a lot of work on this. Next slide, please. And we've come up with a graph like this that basically says, here's where the economic fiber is. So we have access to about 3 million oven-dry tons of fiber that we think is available in that area in the previous picture. Of that, you can see from this, we've got about 500,000 of that will be tied up that we require for producing power. We have about 600,000 that we have put on the table to say we think this is within the economic range of looking at the opportunities that we think are out there for us. There's another 300,000 that, depending where prices go, natural gas or oil, that may be economic. And the rest of it probably isn't going to factor in anything at all, unless you can find really, really small uses for stuff really, really far north. And we haven't yet. The whole issue that we looked at here when we first started was a lot of the people look at bioenergy as an opportunity, and most mills are still doing that. We threw that off the table very quickly. As an example, we looked at pyrolysis oil, which has a lot of opportunities on the energy side. We would have to have natural gas at about $8 to $10 a gigajoule to be competitive on our mill site to use pyrolysis oil. Gas rate's now at about 4.5, so it's got to double before it makes sense. There is an interest in pyrolysis oil if they can, and the technology is being developed to convert that into an oil base and through a refinery and create the products from there. That would be interesting. It's not there right now. So we've decided that our best place to compete against oil. So that leads us, next slide please. Next please. I'll get to that. We've looked at over 50, 60 different technologies, permutations, combinations of things. We've narrowed it down based on a bunch of criteria, technology risk being one of the biggest factors. The biggest one ultimately to us is market. Everybody out here is describing stuff that you can do. I've been to a lot of presentations, lots of stuff we can do. Can you sell it? And we're owned by a large company called Mitsubishi, which is one of the biggest trading companies in the world, and they are marketers. So we have to convince them everything we can do here. First and foremost, there's a market. Secondly, that the technology will work. So maybe a little convoluted, but big in our world. Next. So we did a second filter approach once we narrowed down. And the one I'll highlight here, which is huge to us, is that feedstock again. Is the feedstock has to be compatible. We're not a sawmill. We're not taking in and taking logs and creating lumber and a bunch of nice byproducts like chips and sawdust and that's got the bark off and is nicely sort of purified from biomass. The majority of the biomass that we're going to look at on is tops and limbs, the harvest residual, the residue from our harvesting operation spread out. It's bulky, it's difficult to transport, we're going to chip it up and it's going to have a lot of bark on it. So that's been critical to us, to finding a technology that matches up with that feedstock. We have a lot of it, but it's in a form that's a little different than what most people have been experimenting with. Bunch of other stuff. The last one there, credibility, reputation, is an interesting one. We haven't run into too many snake oil salesmen, though we have some sketchy guys that we got rid of early on. So, next, please. Next. Quickly, we sort of talk about the partnership, and one of the reasons that we attend these things is normally that we look at partnerships being on the feedstock side, on the technology side, and then somebody to buy it, the offtake side. There's a ton of other people we need to get involved in our activities. From the financing side, we use AITF a fair bit. Very good at helping us sort out the snake oil guys, of assessing some of the technologies and giving us advice. We would be in a lot of trouble without a group like AITF. And that's not paid announcement, that's just because we actually believe that. Next, please. So, a bunch of things that we need to have partners. We make pulp. We make a commodity product in a big commodity global industry. We're looking at doing non-commodity products. We need help. And a bunch of these things, and this is what we look for, and where we're trying to find the right fit of companies or organizations to work with us. Next. Where we've been, and I'll just sort of skim through, we have 3 potential pathways. Next slide.
That's it.
Oops. Sorry. skipped a few slides. That was it, sorry. I had one I took out that I was going to use, but oops. The three potential pathways I'll talk about are simply our sugars, lignin, and thanks to Dr. Jost here in particular, and Dr. Yaman Bolik is NCC, which we're very positive on. We're part of the Industrial Research Chair at the U of A. We think it's tremendous possibilities, but the question about the market is there. So we're trying to get into that activity because we think that we can be an NCC producer with an application focus. What application? Depends what the markets say. Sugars, biochemical platform. We are investigating on a daily basis 3 to 4 different technologies to look at the chemical platform as a mid-level chemical platform. And we had one really, really promising one. And when our market study came in, it's no longer that promising. Technology looks really good. At a global sense, the market is good, something we could get into easy. But once you do the next step and look at how that market is structured, heavily vertically integrated, very little access, and we don't have a good story to sell because it would be replacing a not bad chemical with a green chemical. We're trying to find opportunities where we can find a nasty chemical, something that has potentially environmental or health and safety aspects to it that are undesirable. We can slot in a green chemical. We have a few opportunities that we're looking at there. Composites, to a certain extent, we've looked at. We think there's a lot of opportunity with that. It just doesn't fit our model right now because we're a pulp mill. It tends us to the chemical side. The third one is lignin, and we think there's a lot of opportunities with lignin. The difficulty with lignin right now is the cost of getting that lignin down into a usable form, and right now the capital cost appears to be prohibitive. That's one we will continue to monitor and observe because we think it has a tremendous amount of opportunity as well. It's just not there yet. So overall, and just quickly in summary, what we're looking for is a large pulp mill is partners and is opportunities. We think we have the abilities on certain things, but we have to match that up. Our goal is chemicals. That's not everybody's. Others in the forest industry are going to look at composites. They're going to look at energy. Everything has to be specific to our mill site and what works on our site. We're not going to jeopardize a $1.3 billion asset by taking a lot of risk. Bolt-on works well. We have chemicals. We have utilities to sell. 2, whatever venture we create, we're somewhat self-sufficient. We're totally self-sufficient. And we have excess that we can sell. So those are the things we're looking at. The nano crystalline cellulose, I think, of the opportunities we're looking at is the most promising, but it's not the most immediate. So we'll be hedging there and staying involved, and we're going to fully pursue on the chemical side at this stage. So trying to keep on time. That's it.